Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marvel Bishop, and you're now listening to and watching the No Way But Up podcast. This is a very, very special day. I have a great person actually right just in front of me. Usually, I feel like I have been having so many people on this podcast, and definitely great people, but this is definitely the first time that I feel like I am not qualified to interview this beautiful individual. Miss Silva, storyteller, producer, author, writer, just everything in about. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm great. And you are qualified.
Oh, I am.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everybody's qualified to ask questions,
I
and that's all
appreciate it.
it
I
is.
appreciate it. Well, number one, I want to thank you so much for coming on to my podcast,
Of
coming
course.
in, definitely being interviewed, and let's just have a great conversation. So we've known each other for a very, very long time, but
And kind of in passing, we've been acquaintances for a long time, and then
okay.
we actually got to know each other a little bit on a deeper level.
Which was during your Power
It was
Hour
during my
for the
power
Miami 40
hour and
event.
my right. I did an event about storytelling and the power of storytelling.
And that is actually one of your passions, basically, when it comes to
Yeah,
storytelling.
you had some aha moments that day, didn't
No,
you?
well, I want to get into that.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, so,
good.
um, for me, I feel like I'm definitely a person who is a content creator, a person who tries to be a storyteller, in itself, but I didn't really know like what that really entails. So that video that you definitely showed me about quitting my job, we're kind of going fast forward a little bit, kind of want to build this up, but it's
hmm
all good. We're just having a conversation. I was like very moved on just like your story and how you pretty much came about, and you were a news reporter
hmm
basically for Channel Four,
Yeah.
right? And you pretty much transitioned into that to basically pretty much doing your own thing. But before we get into that, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. I want to just get your story on how you came, because you're originally from Iran,
I am
right?
from Iran.
So I
Yes.
wanted to get that story on for the viewership, basically, on
Okay.
how you came here, how you transitioned from basically, uh, two different worlds, basically. I'm guessing, right, from
hmm
Iran to here. So please,
Yeah, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of
sounds
it.
good.
So I was born in Iran, and I was born right before the Iranian Revolution.
Oh wow,
So I witnessed the Iranian Revolution. A lot of people here in the States watched it
how was
on
that experience?
television. I was only 3 or 4 years old, but I remember vividly moments that kind of are seared in my memory,
Mhm.
images that for like a 3 4 year old is really impactful and powerful. I
Wow.
remember the protests on the streets. I remember the uncertainty and the fear. I remember tires being, I mean, it's just like you're going through a revolution, so all of
Mhm.
that stuff is happening around you, and you still have to live on a daily basis. So it's not like you're completely isolated from everything. You're not just sheltered in a home. You're living among people who are amidst in a kind of country that's in the middle of a revolution.
Basically.
So that was pretty impactful. I mean, I clearly didn't understand what was happening at the time, but and then and then growing up, it was after the revolution, before things even settled. Then it was war,
Mm.
the war between Iran and Iraq, and that lasted for good 6 years after that. And if anyone's ever read or studied history or knows anything about war, what happens is, while it's a political conflict between governments and between ideals and ideologies, it's also a very much a um, civil issue in a sense where the people who are impacted are the people who live
Mm.
in that country. So the people who are in power don't feel the effects of war as much as the average person who has to feed their kids, because essentially what happens is you don't get food imported, you don't get goods imported. I mean, just like we are with Iran now, it's sanctions and all of that stuff. So you stand in line for hours for a loaf of bread, and you get meat only on special occasions, maybe once a month. And
Are you serious?
yeah,
Wow.
circumstance. And like you're in the shower and the water is just gets turned off because they're saving water
Hmm.
with no notification. You may or may not have electricity for a day or two or hours on end. So it's a very uncertain kind of environment to live in as a child, and it doesn't, now that I've gotten older, it's
Hmm.
kind of sunk in a little bit more. But when I was at that age, it was just a way of life. I didn't know any better. I didn't know anything different. So why would I think that life should be any different than it was? Right. Also, remember, there's a lot of censorship, so it's not like you're exposed to what what's happening outside of your bubble.
Hmm.
You don't know how other people are living, and you don't know what other people have access to. So you don't have any kind of an idea of what life is like for other people other than yourself and the people that you see.
Right.
So what I'm getting at is it's normal. For you, it's normal. It's a simple, normal way of life. But what I didn't realize is that that was my training in learning and adapting to change very quickly,
Mm.
because it's a mechanism of survival and you have no choice. And when you're in that situation, you just figure it out. As humans, we figure it out. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older, um, in my teens, that I started kind of absorbing a little bit about the impact of war, the impact
Hmm.
on my parents, the impact on the way we lived. And then at that point, I was about 14. Now, remember, we live in Iran, which is and I'm Armenian, which
Hmm.
makes me a minority in the country.
Hmm.
And even though I don't, or my religion doesn't require me to wear the garb, because I live in that country and I live under that power and rule, I have to cover up and I have to follow their guidelines. And it became a scary place to be as a woman, um, because there are no real laws and regulations. You never know what happens when you walk out the door. So, we would hear stories of women who might have been wearing nail polish or lipstick or maybe a little bit of makeup and having acid thrown on their faces
Just because of that.
because of that. So it's a way of controlling the population
Hmm.
to live and abide by certain guidelines and rules, and there is no consequences for how that's dealt with, right? So, or people would disappear and you'd never hear from them, or you wouldn't hear from them for months until they get out of jail and say, I got grabbed on the street because whatever, my scarf was showing too much hair or whatever it may be. So
Were women like were they killed? Like some of them, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, yes, consequences of jailed and killed and hurt and stabbed and disfigured and all of that. And um, living in that kind of space as a woman
Hmm.
is quite terrifying when you're starting to realize that you're a woman and you're starting to realize the limitation of your options
Mm.
and your choices. Once you graduate high school, and then what? When I was there were very few women that went to college
Wow.
because it's a male dominated,
Hmm.
community. So very few women worked, even though my mom was pretty savvy and she had her own business, and my mom drove, which was unheard of, and
Hmm.
all of that
So
stuff.
she definitely pushed the boundaries, basically, like in Iran,
Yeah,
babe.
even in Iran, she pushed
Wow.
the boundaries at the time. But so when you grow up in that kind of space, you don't really. So all of this stuff is hindsight, right? Like
Hmm.
at that moment in time, at 14, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's not until we get out of the country, we escape through some channels that my father knew. We escaped to Germany. We are in limbo in Germany for about 2 years because we're trying to get our paperwork in order. And then
Hmm.
we finally end up in Glendale, California,
Okay.
because we had family in Glendale.
Nice. Nice.
And I started high school. I started 10th grade, not speaking a word of English and not knowing anything about America and how things are done and what life is like as a teenager and what do teens do in high school,
Hmm.
right? So trying to learn a language, trying to figure it out, trying to understand the culture and the nuances of being a high school, 16-year-old, and then also dealing with, family issues and parents and things like that, because now you have one foot in your old country
Hmm.
within the bounds of your house with your family, and then now you've got one foot in the West because you have to adapt to the West in order for you to survive.
So it sounds like adaptation is basically what you've been through like all
Yeah.
your life.
Yeah, change.
Change as well
You know,
too. Yeah.
change, constant change, and
Hmm.
constant. You feel like there's a curveball coming at you at full speed every moment of every day, not by choice, but because of the circumstances that you're in, because
Hmm.
of where you were born, because of the situation. But what I didn't realize was happening in throughout all of that is that I was being trained in how to adapt to change so quickly and how to pivot in life so quickly because I had to do it. I watched my parents do it. It was a matter of survival and thriving and putting one foot in front of the other.
Hmm.
And it's played an instrumental role in my life and in how I've kind of navigated my career and where we are today.
So I was actually going to ask you that because you're saying that you were a person who is just forcing to change basically because of your surroundings and
Hmm.
just adapting and just evolving. And do you feel like that is something that you actually got from your mother? Because you were talking about how your mother was just a woman of just like a renaissance woman basically, because like, or a revolutionary woman, I
Right,
would say, because where she lived, because she owned a business which is basically unheard of,
right,
like she was driving that was basically unheard of.
right.
So that's where you
My
got your strength
both
from.
both of them,
Okay,
mom
well, what
and
about your
dad.
father?
Yeah, my dad too. My dad was he was a business owner when he was a teenager
Mhm.
with his brother, and they had one of the largest mechanic shops in the country, and they served some of the most powerful people in the country. That
Nice.
the lieutenants and the police commissioners and all of that. So he was quite a powerful man and still is even today. A lot of what's happened is that a lot of people have left the country and have literally migrated to places like Glendale, California,
Hmm.
or anywhere in the region, and everybody knows everybody, right? So the 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 kind of interaction and relationship and name and reputation that
Hmm.
they had back then in that country, they still have here because all those people have just kind of, it's like that entire neighborhood has been uprooted and is the diaspora is here.
Hmm.
So they within their own right, my dad was at the time, he was a disciplinarian and still is, and I didn't recognize what he was doing until so much later in life, right? So I'm a little hard headed.
Oh,
No,
oh, you are. Oh,
if nobody has
I
figured
had
that
no
out.
idea, Silva.
So I'm stubborn, I'm hard-headed, I
Hmm.
want my own way, and if something doesn't logically make sense to me,
Hmm.
and if someone's not able to explain it to me, I have a hard time following. So that's just how I've been my entire life.
Hmm.
So needless to say, my dad and I got into a lot of arguments and a
Yeah.
lot of fights, even when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. He'd say, "Put your jacket on." I'd be like, "No, it's cold outside. Put your jacket on." "I don't want to. It's not cold." "Put your jacket on." "But why?" "Because I said so." "That's not good enough." So I had that kind of exchange, which, of course, for a 7-year old, you're just being a 7-year old.
Hmm.
But for him, he was terrified because if I didn't learn to follow instruction and direction and rules, the consequences and the potential of me surviving in that country
Yeah.
of following rules and guidelines was really questionable. And not following the rules is not a matter of a slap in the wrist, a charge, or some time behind bars.
Yeah, it could be.
Consequences of not following the rules is sometimes death.
Yeah, which is
It's a matter of
crazy.
survival,
Yeah.
right? So he was trying to teach me that, and I was being stubborn and not trying to learn it. And I can't imagine as a father, right, as a parent, looking at your family and going, "Oh my God, if we stay here, we're not going to make it, or
Hmm.
she's not going to make it," or
Hmm.
kind of having the foresight of that to then risk everything, leave everything. And
Hmm.
that's what they did. I literally remember my mom putting me in front of a closet and saying, "You pick what you want to take, and we can only take what goes in this suitcase.
Wow.
Everything else stays. You'll never see it again." So at the time, I'm like, "Oh, cool, we're going somewhere cool."
Yeah.
But now looking back, can you imagine them having to do that, leaving a lifetime of what they had, a lifetime of what they've worked for, to go into the unknown? It's not like they knew where they were coming. It's not like they knew that the states
If
would
they
be
were coming back
better.
or whatever. I mean,
They're
there was no,
they knew they were
there were,
never coming
yeah, okay,
back,
there was
right?
pretty much
So one of the things the government does is that to ensure that you come back, they force you to leave all of your collateral, all of
your
your
belongings.
all of it's not just physical belongings, but your bank account and your house and your
Mm.
anything that could be of value that could be sold and used, to live elsewhere. So we left with nothing.
Wow, that's actually
Yeah.
pretty deep and pretty amazing. So let's fast forward just a little bit. So went from Germany, then you went to California, and then you said in the high school, what 10th grade? You said you did not know how to
Speak
speak
English.
any
I
English.
spoke like
So
this,
so
and I sounded like a
so
foreigner.
here's the thing. I want to get to know Da Silva, pretty much the transition of you going from that to basically becoming one of like the greatest news reporters like ever.
No, thank you.
I like that's like I would really love to hear that.
So I think part of my own story has played a role in me wanting to tell other people's story,
Mm.
because I recognized very early on the power of context. So, you can show people a series of pictures, but they won't understand the impact of it until you put it into context. Same thing with video or even a series of words, right? I could have given you a whole bunch of facts about my past,
Mhm.
but you're not able to really feel the story and understand me or where I come from until I'm able to put those facts into context, right? So I recognized the power of that very early on, because I realized when I would tell people from where I'm from and what I want to do, the response wasn't so powerful as it
Mhm.
was when I would tell them a little bit about myself, a little bit about, what I've been through, a
Mhm.
little bit about putting a little bit of a human element into it. And I was always sort of drawn to that. Fast forward in high school, I graduated with the help of dictionaries and tutors. I didn't get to USC because I wanted to get into
You wanted to go to
I
USC?
wanted to go to USC I had like a 700 and something
Pause.
SAT
Pause real
score.
quick. I am the hugest Southern California fan in the world, by the way. I never knew that. Like,
That's the
fight on
only
all day.
that's the
Wow.
only school I wanted to go to, and I didn't get in.
Oh,
I was
man.
devastated because I was like, what am I going to do now? And
Mhm.
it's one of those things where it feels such a lonely place to be, because I couldn't explain any of that to my parents. They didn't understand the concept or the idea or the impact of that. So I was like, okay, well, again, here comes life has thrown you a curveball. What
Mhm.
am I going to do? I literally remember sitting on the coffee table, opening the letter and looking at it. And I sat there for about 15 minutes. And I put the letter away, and I was on to the next thing. Like, I was like, okay, I'm going to pivot. I got to do something else.
Mhm.
I got to figure it out. So I went out and got a full-time job, put myself through community college for 2 years, and took all the classes that I needed to take and applied and got into USC. So
Nice.
I eventually graduated from USC again with the help of dictionaries and tutors. Um, and my last year at USC, somebody told me about internships.
Mm.
And I was like, what are internships? How does this work? So I figured out how to apply, and I applied and got an internship at KCBS in Los Angeles. And I went to a newsroom. I'll never forget. I experienced my very first chase in Los Angeles. The very first chase, where reports of a chase on the freeway, and I was standing there just like watching the chaos that happens in a newsroom. People yelling at each other, people yelling over each other, people phones ringing off the hook, scanners going on. I mean, it is the loudest, most chaotic place you could possibly be.
Mhm.
But somehow everybody is communicating smoothly. And the moment the information comes in into the newsroom, it is literally on the air seamlessly within seconds. And I was like,
I know
whoa,
you love that.
how does that happen? I want to do that. And that's when I was hooked. And that's when I was like, I'm going to figure out how all of this works and how this leads to that and how that person's important to this. And then fast forward in my internship, I became friends with Steve Hartman. Do you know who that is?
I'm not gonna lie. I'm a
Okay.
little ignorant to that.
So Steve Hartman is one of the greatest human interest storytellers, reporters that has been around. And he had a segment at KCBS called Everybody Has a Story.
Mm.
And he now has a segment called On the Road on CBS Nightly News. And Everybody Has a Story was this segment where, actually, I don't think it was at KCBS. I think he went from KCBS to network, and he did it at network. So the premise was everybody has a story, no matter who you are and what walk of life you're from. And he would take this dart and he would throw it on the map.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever the dart landed, that's where he would fly. He would fly there, whatever city that was. And then he would stop at a payphone, which we don't have anymore. And he'd pull out a Yellow Pages, which we don't have anymore.
Rest in peace.
And he'd look through a yellow page. He'd flip through a yellow page, and then he'd just close his eyes and then scroll down and put his finger on a name. And he would go knock on that person's door. And he'd be like, I'm Steve Hartman from CBS. I'm here to tell your story. And people would be like, you're here for me?
Talk about the element of surprise.
Yeah, but like ordinary people that would never expect. And he was able to, these stories were extraordinary stories. And it's not the people, it's the way you tell a story. And I worked with him. He's so talented for about 2 sessions of my internship. And I was hooked. I was like, I want to know how to tell a story like that. I want to know how to make people feel that. Right? What happens? What is the process? How do you write? What do you do? How do you create this visual product that makes people feel a particular way?
And the thing is, knowing you as a person and how you were talking about, back in the day with your family and your father, how you were just so resilient and you were just so, I guess, relentless on basically just, having focus,
Yeah.
and just like, not having no as an answer, basically.
Yeah.
And just being persistent. Like, do you feel like that was definitely one of your assets of being a reporter? Because
Absolutely.
like, talk about it. Like, I'm pretty much sure, like, whenever you need to talk about somebody or you need to pretty much get like an insight on the story, like sometimes, you definitely get the door shut plenty of times.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? Like, how do you keep on?
How do you deal with people saying no?
Yes.
You just keep going. I mean, so I learned that from my mother, right? Because she always got what she wanted. Maybe she didn't get it exactly the way she wanted it. But she always, if she wanted to do something, and even if she didn't know it, she'd go find the answer and figure it out by asking questions. So there were a lot of times when people said no. And no just meant not now or not yet, or I'm not the person who's going to answer that question for you, or I'm not the person who's going to help you. And she kept, and I always say she didn't have the luxury of being upset and being hurt and having her feelings crushed or her spirit crushed when people said no. She didn't have that luxury. She had to get up and move on because she had 3 young daughters in a new country that she had to figure things out for.
Do you feel like people definitely get caught up in emotions too much about when they get,
Yeah, seriously, get over it. Like, I mean, people say that's harsh and that's mean. I'm like, it's not harsh. That's the reality of life. Like, if you don't learn to get over shit, can I swear?
Yes, you curse. It's fine. It's all good.
I'm a reporter,
curse,
so
yeah.
If you don't learn to get over shit fast, you're gonna be left behind because. Especially in this day and age of technology, things are moving so fast that if you don't learn to like look at something and be like, okay, that didn't work or that worked or that wasn't cool, but and dust yourself off and figure out what you're going to do next, there's like 100 other people running as fast as you or longer than you. And I have a theory about success. It's not a sprint. And, I use this theory working in journalism, and people would ask me, I spent 20 years working nonstop. And I moved every 16 months to a new market and to a new job, which means every 16 months I had to prove myself. So you don't have time to slack off, right? And being a television journalist, it's super intense on every day is intense. Every day you're chasing something new and people are saying no. So you have to figure out a way. I don't have the luxury of coming back to my boss and be like, you assigned me that story, but I don't have anything today. She'll be like, or he'll be like, I
You're
don't care.
fired.
The 5 o'clock news is coming around the corner and you're
Yeah.
gonna have something.
Mm.
You don't get the luxury of saying I don't have anything. You see what I'm saying?
I got
So
you.
you figure it out. But when you think that way, you realize that success is about who is still standing at the end. Because everyone has curveballs coming at them. Everyone has adversity, everyone has family issues, everyone has mental blocks, everybody goes through all of these things professionally or personally. And it's a matter of, do you know yourself well enough to know how to pace yourself in life in order for you to be standing when everybody else has run out of breath, when everybody else has burnt themselves out and can no longer keep up?
Can you go past E?
Will you still be standing, and will you still keep going? And that theory and that methodology is what has really made me successful in a newsroom. It's not because I was the best reporter. It's not because I look like a reporter, because I don't. It's not because I spoke the perfect English. I have the worst spelling and grammar capabilities of anybody you'll ever know in the broadcast world.
You just wanted it more.
Because English is my fourth language. It's because I outworked and outpaced everybody. Do you understand what I'm saying?
What's the saying? Hard work beats talent. I believe it's just hard work pretty much beats talent at the end of the day.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It's not enough to just working hard.
True.
If you continuously work hard, at some point, physically and mentally, you're going to get tired.
Yeah, you're gonna burn out.
You're going to burn out. It's not about that. It's about working hard, but working smart. And that takes. And I know you listen to a lot of people like Gary Vee. He talks about this a lot, right? Knowing yourself. Self-awareness, right? And I don't know if people understand the context of that. Self-awareness means knowing yourself enough to know when it's time to give up, when it's time to quit something and try something else, when it's time to rest, when it's time to push, when it's time, right? Which season are you in your life and in your career and in your pursuit in order for you to figure out how you're going to get to the next level? Because not everybody is going to get there the same way, and not everybody is going to use the same methods to get there. The idea is, if you know yourself well enough, you know what you need to do in order to get there quicker. And when you're there, you're still standing. And when you're there and someone's like, oh, but can you do this? You're not burnt out, and you're like, yeah, I can, because I can push past this. I know myself. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Is it making any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So, I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I traveled around the country with a girlfriend. We did a road trip for 11 months.
Oh, nice.
That's another story for another podcast.
Yes.
We're not going to get into that. If you want to know more, just go check out my YouTube page. One of the stops we made was in Colorado Springs. And in Colorado Springs, there's something called the Incline.
Okay.
Colorado Springs is a big military town, and it used to be a place for the railroads used to go through Colorado Springs. And Colorado Springs, just like Colorado, has lots of mountains and lots of valleys and peaks and whatnot. And this particular incline is a old railroad line that the lines have been taken off, and the only thing standing are the wood pieces.
Okay.
So it looks like a staircase, but it's not just any staircase. So we got to Colorado Springs and we said, what should we do? We need to do something local. And everybody said, you guys are outdoorsy girls. And we were like, yes. They're like, you have to do the incline. Okay. So we get to the incline, and the incline starts like this. And if you're listening, I'm going to try to describe it for you. It's kind of got a little bit of a slope, and then it goes up the mountain, very slowly. It's not a deep slope. It's not a deep uphill. It's a very slow, curvy uphill until you actually get to the peak of the mountain, and then it like straightens up and goes
Mhm.
all the way up.
Wow.
How a railroad, how a car literally went up the tracks like that, I have no idea.
Mhm.
But it was several miles of that. So you stood on the bottom and you looked at it, and all you could see is like a dot on top of the mountain,
Uh-huh.
which is the end of this path. And I looked at my girlfriend, and she looked at me. She's like, "Do you want to try it?" I was like, "Well, we're here.
Might as well.
We're not going to turn around. Like, we have to."
Yeah.
The problem is, by the time you get tired when you're going up the incline, there is no turning back. Because if you turn around, by the time you get tired, you're so far up that it's such an incline and it's so steep that you're terrified of coming back
Yeah.
or climbing down those stairs. You either have to go up or you're stuck. So
No way but up.
no way but up, right?
Yeah.
So we decided to go, and I mean, I'm pretty athletic, and so was she. And as people were passing us,
Mhm.
these are locals. We would talk to them. So, what's the secret in making through this? What's the secret? How many times have you done this? And people had attempted multiple times and given up. These are people who are trying again. Like, this is not something you are able to accomplish right away. And one kid, I never forget, he had one of those backpacks that he was drinking water out of, and he was going super slow, and we're climbing up, like very intentional with every step he was making. So we slowed down, we started talking to him. He said, "I've attempted this several times, but I'm going to make it to the top." And okay, so what's the secret? He said, "Slow and steady is the secret to getting to the top." Slow and steady is the secret to getting to the top. He's like, people start and they start going really fast and exerting all of their energy on the
Then
bottom.
they're dead.
By the time they get halfway through, they can't go further. Or people start too slow and then they can't dig deep enough to find what it takes to actually push through it. He goes, slow and steady and intentional and focus, one step in front of the other. If you just focus on that, you'll make it to the top.
People are actually just too worried about the result versus actually just going through the process and just going through the method.
Right. It was such a important life lesson that it didn't really sink in until much, much later. We were talking about the incline and making to the top of the mountain. But it's such an important life lesson to learn, is to say, slow and steady, one foot in front of the other. It's the only way you're going to make it to the top. And how slow you go and how big your steps are is really relative to who you are, right?
Yes.
You're much taller than I am.
A little bit.
Your steps are different than mine.
Yeah.
And that's where self-awareness comes in. So maybe for every 2 steps I take, you take 1 step. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am.
So essentially, that's what happened. We slowed down and we became very intentional, because remember, Colorado Springs is already high elevation, and as you're climbing the incline, you're
It gets
going
higher and
higher
higher.
in elevation.
Air gets thinner.
So air gets thinner. So it's not just the physical exertion of being tired and climbing these stairs. It's also the air. Physically speaking, you are having trouble getting up there. And it took us 2.5 hours to make it to the top.
Wow.
And by the time we got to the last half hour, it was like, on 4s, climbing up like you're climbing a ladder. It took us 4.5 hours to come back on switchback on the other side of the mountain.
How did that feel when you got to the top?
It was amazing. It was amazing, but it was one of the most important lessons I've learned, when I feel like, because I feel like I have to be productive all the time, and if I'm not productive, then I'm wasting time, right? So it was a really great lesson, and I've really taken it to heart and adapted it in 2019 to say that I am really going to be aware that everything I do has intention behind it, and it's slow and steady, and I'm not comparing myself and my speed and my success to other people, but I am comparing it to myself. And at the end of the day, people can run and get there faster, but I will be the only one standing.
So do you think that passion and that energy that you have definitely transitioned you into taking the jump.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's one thing that we had, well, two things we have in common right now. Number one, we love USC. Number two,
Ooh, 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 ooh,
number
ooh.
two, we've definitely shared, I guess, the process of
Mhm.
quitting your job and then also jumping.
Yes.
I would love to like really get into that because I'm
Mhm.
really, passionate on just taking chances and just having no as you can't take no as an answer.
Right.
And how did you get to that point?
How did I get to a point of jumping?
Yes.
So, I I'm going to go back to 2009. I was laid off from my reporter job, TV job in
Wow.
Detroit. I was working for NBC, and when the economy went bad, they had to do cuts, just like every other business, particularly in Detroit, because most of their advertising dollars come from car companies,
Okay.
and they stopped spending money. So the income for the TV stations really dried up. So I literally got laid off, and at that point, I decided that I was not going to allow someone else to decide my fate. I wasn't going to let somebody else have control over my life and decide my fate, because at that point I had no other income and no other recourse, and I essentially lost everything.
Wow.
Okay, so I had credit card debts. I couldn't pay them. I had homes in Texas. I couldn't save them. I lost everything. I packed my bags and I moved down here because I had a girlfriend who lived here, and I wanted to detox. I wanted to get away and collect my head. And here was another opportunity that, like when you talk about change and pivoting and trying to figure out what to do, um, that led to the road trip that I talked about, and the success of the road trip. It was just an idea. It was a blog that turned into a road trip. We were doing it because we weren't doing anything else, and it was fun. And that actually turned into a business. And I realized at the end of that, oh, I have a little bit of a knack for starting a business, and I know what I'm doing instinctively. And because I've been in this world of journalism, I understand sales, and I understand talking to people. I understand pitching. I understand the components. I just didn't know what they were called. So I realized at that point I can take someone's vision and turn it into a reality, whatever that would be, whether it was a piece of video or it was a piece of business. And that's when I started my business. So I've always since then had my business on the side
Nice.
on some form or variation. Um, Sometimes it was consulting, sometimes it was video production, sometimes it was media training. It depended. It depended on who the client was and what I was doing at that time. Eventually, I went back to work because I really love storytelling, and the place where I could do that on a daily basis was news. But what ended up happening was the longer I stayed in news, the more I realized I was telling the kind of stories I didn't want to tell anymore. It was all just bad news. There used to be a time where you used to have like a sprinkle of human interest stories or good news or something like that, or investigative pieces or consumer related pieces. All we kept doing was reiterating the problem, the problem, the problem, the problem, and we didn't find enough solutions to put out there. And a number of other things happened that I won't get into, that made me reevaluate the situation I was in. And most people don't jump because of the uncertainty. Most people feel like they need to make a change. Almost everybody, I'm willing to bet, feels like they want to make some kind of change, whether it's make a move, whether it's changing of a job, whether it's adding a new hobby or dating somebody new or whatever it is. Most people want to do something that they're afraid of. And the only difference is I'm just comfortable with uncertainty because I've lived in the space of uncertainty for so long, even as a child
Your whole
and
life.
my entire life,
Yeah, I mean,
that uncertainty is actually exciting
your
to me.
friend.
Yeah, it's exciting to me. And this is a muscle that you build over time, and it's a muscle that you exercise on a daily basis to get to a point of where I am, which is I just believe. I believe in myself. I believe that I can do it. I believe in my instincts, and I just believe. And that didn't just happen, right? It didn't. I didn't just wake up one day and I'm like, wow, I believe in myself.
It was a gradual process.
I
It was a-
remember. I
yeah.
remember making cassette tapes. Okay, because we didn't have any money and I wasn't buying any CDs at the time.
Wow.
I remember recording. I remember recording music off the radio
Mhm.
on cassette tapes, and I remember having a cassette tape called, and I labeled it "Believe," and every song on that tape was about believing. So can you name some songs about believe? I literally programmed my brain by listening to that tape over and over and over and over again.
Don't stop believe.
Yes.
That's
Don't
stop
believe it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I believe I can fly.
Yeah.
I know
Or
R. Kelly's a little
yeah,
sensitive,
it's
but
all good.
but you
at
know,
the time,
but
yeah.
at the time,
Yeah.
right? So I believe in miracles.
Mhm.
You know, like every song was about believing. It was about believing in the impossible. And I would literally listen to that on a daily basis to make myself believe that it was possible. Because at the time, what I was trying to do was impossible. Who was going to give a television job to a foreigner who doesn't look like the part, doesn't sound like the part, doesn't even fit the part,
Yeah.
who wants to be a journalist? Like, it was unheard of. Unheard of. When I wanted to be in journalism, the Kim Kardashians of the world did not exist.
That's okay. I got you.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mhm,
It was
mhm.
a completely different time and different era, and there was a box you fit in. You either fit into that box or you were not one of them.
But you pretty much made your own box then, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically.
But so I had to believe that
Mhm.
that was possible, and that was
Yeah.
the beginning of believing, right? And even to this day, sometimes I have this imposter syndrome of like, who you think you are that you can do this, and I'm like, yeah, but I can't.
Yeah.
'Cause I
And
believe.
you've been doing it.
Right.
You know?
But the reason I say that is because it's a muscle that you have to work every single day. I have to wake up every day and tell myself that I believe.
And-
That I believe in the impossible, that I
Mhm.
believe that things are going to work out exactly the way it's meant to, and that there is a greater power that I don't understand, and that as long as I am fully present and in my intention of why I'm doing what I'm doing, everything will fall into place. I think people focus too much on the how. If you just focus on the what and the process, the how will reveal itself. The how will come in ways that you didn't even think about,
True.
right? And I think these ideas are not new. People talk about this stuff all the time. It's just a matter of how are you going to put these ideas into context of your own life.
Mhm.
So understanding one, who you are and what your limitations and your boundaries are, what you can and cannot do, what you're willing and not willing to do, right? So I know myself to know that someone can come and offer me $1 million and to ask me to do X. I'm not going to do it because I know myself well enough that that's not what I want to do. And that's not where my intention is, and that's not aligned with who I am. And I have a passion and I have a vision, and if I just walk in that space and I'm slow and steady in my process, I'll get to where I want to go. Maybe it's not a straight path, maybe it looks like a crazy path, but I'm still going to get there eventually. So, I know all of this sounds so theoretical. It sounds so 500,000 feet, right? And this is the reason why I started the vlog, right? I quit my job. I decided that wasn't, my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit different. And I didn't know what that was yet. But I knew that I could no longer be in that box anymore. That I knew. So I jumped. I jumped without a net. I jumped without a job. I jumped without any clients. I jumped. I still had my business, but I had to rev it up a little bit and try to figure out how to make money and live, right? So in my jumping, I realized that I listened to a lot of this content as well, but nobody was talking about the process of getting to this point. Nobody's talking about what is the process you go through when you want to exercise your believe muscle. Nobody's talking about what is the process you go through when you are trying to get comfortable with uncertainty, right? People say that's what you're supposed to do, but how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you do that when you're in it, when you're in the middle of it, when you've
Yeah.
just jumped and you're freaking out? How do you do that?
I think I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think a lot of people have a problem with like vulnerability.
Yeah.
You know, they have a problem with, you know, really showing that side because it's the ugly side.
It is the ugly
It's
side.
the side that people, they feel like they don't want to
And
see
I was
it.
like, ding, 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 ding,
And
ding,
that's
gold.
honestly what people not only want to see, but that's something that you should show too, only for yourself as well.
Yeah.
Because it really shows you where you came from and where you are going and
Yeah.
where you're at.
And that's what I did. That's what I did because I'm a storyteller,
Mm-hmm.
because I am a visual storyteller, right? So I was like, I am going to create content that is going to show the ugly side. Not because I'm trying to scare people or trying to discourage people from doing what they're doing, but because I'm trying to tell people I'm right there with them, right? That people leave their house and put on a pretty face and they never talk about what goes on behind the scenes. But I wanted to talk about what goes on behind the scenes. What is this turmoil you're going through personally and professionally? And how do you get out of it? And how do you deal with it? How do you deal with a client that doesn't pay you? How do you deal with the moments when you're not believing? Because those come.
Yeah, of course.
How do you deal with the moments when
It's
you're
all about
feeling...
humanizing yourself.
Yeah.
right?
Well, it's not just about... It wasn't... It's
Oh,
not...
that's a part of it. I
Right.
should
It
say.
hasn't
Yeah.
been about humanizing me. It's been about talking about the things that people have a hard time talking about, right? And I felt like since I'm going through the process, if I just talk about it and if I let people see me in my vulnerable state, not the pretty polished
Yeah.
reporter that you used to watch on television, but the ugly cry, you know what I'm saying?
I got you.
When I'm like having a meltdown. If I show people that it's okay to live in the space of duality because that's who we are, and that we all are on our own path of trying to figure it out, then it gives people permission to be more of themselves. Because essentially, I gave myself permission to be more of myself in that process. You see what I'm saying?
I got you.
So I did those contents selfishly for myself. It was my own therapy. It was really cathartic. I had no mission or reason or intention or even money or sponsorship, right? I dipped into my own pocket and created those because I felt so passionate about talking to people and connecting with people on that level. And what's been amazing is in focusing on the process and on the what, it has really revealed the how. It's
Not
really
focusing on the how, but focusing on other things.
on the-
Actually reveals
the how.
The how.
It's revealed how I'm going to make money off of it. It's revealed how it's brought me clients. It's brought me peace. It's brought me new friendships. It's helped me shed some other ones.
Of course.
It's the result, the byproduct of what I wanted out of it has shown itself by me just focusing on what I'm doing and being really present in the intention and the process, right? I was like, okay, one step in front of the other. I'm climbing the incline, right? I'm going to produce these videos, and these videos are gonna need to go through this process to get produced. Literally, that's what I focused on. And I focused on telling the story and telling a really great story and making these vlogs really powerful. And in that process, everything else just kind of fell into place. And I don't think people believe that's possible.
Well, that's
And
why
it
we have
is.
you.
Well, thank you. But I really would love for people to step into the unknown a little bit more often. Step into the unknown knowing that you're going to be okay. Like, the sun's still going to rise.
Yeah.
It's still going to set.
If it's not fatal, like one of my sayings is, if it's not fatal, it's not that serious.
Yeah. I mean, people are always going to be people. They're going to judge you. They're going to say things. They're going to this and they're going to, I mean, all of that, right? So, my mother always used to say, don't ever take no for an answer. And she still does. And her saying is, oh, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I always ask myself that question. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? Before I quit, I ask myself, you're going to quit. You're going to leave. What's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is I may never work in news again. Okay.
On to the next one.
I wasn't in news to be attached to a logo. I wasn't in news to have my face on television. I was in news because I really enjoyed storytelling. And with all of the technology that's available today, I can go out there and tell stories with my phone and put it on online.
Definitely.
So I can fulfill that purpose very easily. So that's what's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah, definitely. So, wow, this man, I feel like I've definitely gotten to know a new Silva. Like,
really?
This is
okay.
amazing.
So I have a question.
Oh boy. Okay, a little switch up and
okay,
no way.
Well, how
podcast.
are we doing on time? How are we doing on
time? We're doing way over, but it's it's 10:30.
Oh my gosh, it's
okay,
10:30.
Right, we're gonna wrap up.
Okay, I have a question though.
Yes, ma'am.
So tell me and don't think too much about it.
Okay.
Try to give as the first answer that pops into your head is usually the right one,
Okay.
and the right one is the one that is yours.
Okay.
Is what I'm trying to say.
Got it.
So what was your first impression of watching that video?
I quit my job.
I quit my job. Yeah.
Man, just transparency and just like, wow, that's me, and like just emotional and just powerful and revealing and just being real and raw. That's what I got from it.
How did you see yourself in it?
Because I actually went through the same process.
Mm.
You know, 2015, 2016, I actually quit Story Nightclub just like that because I had to. Because I felt like I did not want to have other people, other forces basically dictate my life or dictate my end result basically.
How has that been for you?
I'm here.
Yeah, but I mean, seriously, how has that been for you?
Okay, that was a PC answer. Okay, I'm sorry. It's tough.
You should know better than to just
I
give
know.
me a PC
Yeah, you're
answer.
right. I'm sorry, guys, ladies and gentlemen. That was not right. It's been a crazy roller coaster.
Yeah.
Yes, up and down.
Have you had your face plank moments?
Yes, of course.
Yet?
Yeah, there's been times where I've been having my face planked for like maybe a couple days, maybe more than days. But then you know what? I got back up because, like I said, like what you said, I'm actually in the process, especially in 2019, to take the process slow and steady. Me, you know, I'm a Sagittarius. I want things now. Like I'm very impulsive.
I think every entrepreneur, everybody who has the entrepreneurial spirit, has that, and that is the hardest thing to do and the hardest thing to quiet. That's why when I said, you know, like slow and steady and pacing yourself is really important. Really important.
Definitely.
Because if you don't, your body will tell you.
Yeah. No, and my body has told me.
Okay.
Like, you know, that's, you know, hey, listen, like if you don't slow down, like you're gonna die. So like, you know, I'm not the healthiest person in which is another subject, I guess. But but you know, because of, you know, I'm a type 2 diabetic, you know what I'm saying? I do have like, you know, other ailments. So that right there has definitely kind of like
put things on focus.
Exactly. Put things in perspective. Like, hey, listen, like you can work as much as you want.
When you think about that, when you think about if you don't pay attention to that stuff and that you may not have the luxury of the time to accomplish what you accomplish, how's that make you feel?
Wow. Kind of lost for words right now, honestly.
Why?
I don't know.
It puts things in perspective.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes you stop sweating the small stuff. I didn't ask you that question for any reason other than to get people thinking about, wow, when you think about your time is really limited.
Yes,
and I've really been precious.
You can get back anything,
you know,
but
the older I
time.
get, the more I'm like, oh my God, I'm almost halfway through my life. Right? And if I wake up tomorrow and I don't have the chance to do, or I'm not healthy enough to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Have I done enough? Have I said what I want to say? Have I lived authentically and in a way that I can be satisfied? And that had a lot to do with my decision too. It's like, okay, how much longer am I going to live inauthentically and ignore the fact that I don't fit into this box, you know? Or am I just going to say, you know what, screw it. I'll figure out what to do with the logistics of money and all of this other stuff. I'm going to focus on being authentically myself and living an authentic life. And my videos are about that too, is, you know, there was so many times where I did stories about horrible things and instinctively and intuitively, I just wanted to reach over at people and just give them a hug and tell them
Yeah.
it was going to be like, you know what I mean? That's
Mhm.
who I am. But as a reporter, you can't do that.
Mhm.
You can't be invested and emotional in that space. And I would do it after the camera stopped rolling.
Okay.
But I realized that I was not that person anymore. I was much more sympathetic and empathetic than I even gave myself credit for. And I
Mhm.
wanted to really feel what other humans feel, and wanted to take the ability to um, showcase that and make those imperfections beautiful,
Mhm.
and showcase those imperfections and say it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay not know the answer. It's okay to say I don't know what I don't know. And the reason I asked you how you felt about that video, and I haven't told Chantel this. I told her I'd tell her about it later. There's a conference in town. It's the NAPTE conference, the
Mhm.
National Association of Television Producers, something or other. It's
Okay.
basically all of the people who are behind the scenes, who are making, wheeling and dealing on buying shows and selling shows and producing shows, a whole bunch of
Mhm.
production companies, and all of the studios that are in town. And they're also doing educational sessions. So I went and didn't know why. And I went with one clear intention that I'm going to just be present, and I'm going to take it in as it comes, and I'm gonna absorb, and whoever I'm supposed to meet, I'm gonna meet. Whoever I'm not supposed to meet, I'm not gonna stress over it, right?
Mhm.
Like, I met a gentleman the very first day, just sharing a sitting space with him. We talked for a few minutes. I asked him what he did. It turns out he is responsible for. Do you know the show Better Late Than Never?
Yes, I heard about it.
Okay. He's responsible for bringing that show over. He's responsible for bringing Shark Tank over from
Okay.
he's responsible for making those deals to bring these episodes, these game shows and comedies. Like, he's pretty.
Pretty
Anyway,
big.
so I said, I said, I've been producing content. I come from a journalism world. I've just accidentally produced a whole bunch of episodes, and I'm just here, since this is where the content producers are, to just get feedback and some ideas.
Mhm.
He was like, okay, cool. And I was like, well, do you think I can get an appointment with you? And he looked at me and was like, okay. I mean,
Taking chances. Yeah.
when will you ever have an opportunity for an appointment with a studio executive, right?
Yeah.
I just went for it. I was like, well, okay, well, what? He's going to say no. He pulls out his calendar. He's like, I'm available tomorrow at 4. I was like, okay, great. So yesterday, I was having one of those face plank days,
Mhm.
because my body's been telling me I'm pushing too hard, right? Back problems, backache, stub my toe. Like, it's just been like
Yeah.
horrible, right? I just didn't feel like being there. But I was like, are you going to make this appointment? Are you going to make this appointment? You going to make this appointment? So I make the appointment. We sit down. We talk for a little bit. So I give him a little. He says, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." So I give him the spiel about Iran and how I got here, and I
Mhm.
wanted to be a reporter. So I give him a little bit of a background. He goes, "Okay, so what are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I quit my job." And it's like, "Okay, but what are you doing now?" I said, "Well, accidentally I started, creating this content because I really wanted to stay connected with myself, and I wanted to stay authentic, and blah 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 blah." So anyway, long story short, he's like, "Ah, it's 4:20. I have a 4:30. I have to go." I was like, "Okay, but can I? It's 3 minutes. Can I show you this trailer?" He was like, "Sure." I don't know what I can do with it. I was like, I just want to see
Yeah.
what your thoughts are. Okay, I'm gonna try not to cry. He watched the trailer.
Mhm.
Now this is at the at the Blue Bar. The place is packed with people. Music is blasting. Okay, super loud. Okay, this is like, it's already like approaching 5 o'clock. People are already
Mhm.
drinking. It's, the scene is,
Scene is heavy.
heavy,
Yeah.
right? So it's not like we're sitting in a quiet room. He's listening to the episode, and then he takes his earphones out, and I press pause, and I look at him, and he looks at me, and his eyes well up. And
Mm.
I was like, so? He goes, "I love you." I was like, "I'm sorry?" He's like, "That was worth me being here this entire weekend. And I'm telling you that to say, even though I sold to Korea and Germany and Switzerland, and I've done big, huge deals while I've been here, but that was worth it. And this man is older, married, couldn't stop crying in the middle of the freaking bar. He tears down his face. And he kept wiping his tears. He's like, I have no idea why I'm crying, but that was so powerful.
Yeah.
That was so amazing. I was like, my jaw was on the floor. He's like, I must not be the first person who gave you that reaction. You must have that reaction from people all the time. I said, yeah, but I don't have a reaction from someone who watches content and sells content and, acquires content.
Yeah.
Someone who's in this business and knows and understands the intricacies of creating content have that kind of reaction. And then he said, at the end of the day, I am human. And that was like, made every decision I have made up to this point make sense. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know why I was doing it. I wasn't making any money off of it. But having a validation and confirmation from somebody like that was like, you know what? This is a sign that I am on the right
road
path.
Yeah.
And I may not know where I'm going or who I'm meeting next or what the next deal is, just like I didn't know what today was going to be like. But this is a sign.
Wow, that was, listen.
So there's signs around us.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the time.
Silva, this has been
super long,
but phenomenal. Definitely great. But to wrap up, I love the conversation we definitely had. I want to I have an end question I give everybody because
Sure.
I want to know from you. What does No Way But Up mean to you?
What does No Way But Up mean to me? It really means growth. It means, I think people think of No Way But Up as just up, right? Because of the name. But to me is like, sometimes you do go down in order to go up, right? Sometimes you do take a couple of steps backwards in order to step forward or step sideways or whatever it is, or pivot or turn around and go to a different direction. So No Way But Up, it means growth and being open and available and honest with yourself about what you need and what's around you to be better version of yourself daily.
Silva, thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I just want to give some shameless plugs real quick.
Yeah,
where to find
yeah.
you, Instagram, YouTube, all that. Go ahead.
So my episodes are on YouTube. They live on YouTube. The trailer is the first thing you'll be able to watch, and then there's 9 episodes already out, and they're fun and interesting. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to pitch anything. It just, if you need a little inspiration and a little bit of a kick, a little motivation, a little entertainment, go check them out. And then you can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter,
We'll
Silva
put everything in the bio for you.
Harapetian, and
Yes.
everything is my handle.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ms. Silva, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening and watching the No Way But Up podcast. This is the great Ms. Silva. Appreciate it. No Way But Up.